Hello, it's Anthony Chadwick from the Webinar Vet, welcoming you to another episode of VETchat, the UK's #1 veterinary podcast. I'm very fortunate today to have Tullis Matson on the line. Tullis is the founder of Nature's Safe, which is a really interesting charity that we're going to talk about over the next 20 minutes, half an hour. But we obviously share a few things in common, Tullis. As we've been chatting, there is an interest in AI and frozen semen, isn't there? There's a common bond.
There is. Yeah, we've been sort of doing artificial insemination with horses for, I feel like an eternity now, but sort of 30 odd years now, which is great. It's great to see the journey it's changed over those 30 years to see where it is now, and the uptake of it in the UK as well has been quite brilliant. Yeah.
Well, I remember when I was a student, I went around with a great vet called John Newcomb.
The legend.
Prior to going to vet school, and then at vet school, and then at the end, one of my favourite horses, Coleman, was at the vet school as well, and I ended up looking after him. And I think Coleman's got a reputation in the field. There was plenty of semen stored, and presumably lots of foals out there that are Coleman's offspring.
Yes, I think there would be. Yes, yeah. I mean, that's the beauty about AI and frozen semen, and that's what we'll come on to later. You can use it, in 10, 20, 30, or even 1,000 years time. That's the beauty about it. When it's saving those genetics, it's a great way of, as a business side or as a conservation side. Yeah.
And of course, the cattle industry led the way. It was very, very entrenched and very much accepted in the cattle industry. Obviously, there was this conservative attitude in the horse industry, and particularly, I mean, thoroughbreds still can't be artificially inseminated, can they? Or at least they can't then go on to race and things.
No, so the thoroughbred industry, everything's got to be done by natural covering for many reasons, and for good reasons as well. Obviously. Yeah. The gene pool would suddenly, would shrink if they can cover about 250 mares, and they could suddenly maybe do 1,000. So the sport horse industry was, I would say, maybe in the shadow of the thoroughbred industry for a while with the techniques, and then we've started doing it. Must be 32, 33 years ago now. Through by an accident. We were naturally covering, and unfortunately, the Stallion ruptured the mare, and the mare passed away. And that was an Irish draft stallion as well, a stallion called Sportsman, and by Skippy. And I thought there must be an easy way of doing this. And literally from that, it's amazing how your paths take you in business or whichever way it is. I thought there must be an easy way. And I used to hatch chickens. I loved hatching chickens out and had all these incubators, and I cleaned all my incubators out, put all my AI stuff in them. It may not be very hygienic back then. Thought, right, this is find another way. And I learned it in New Zealand, because in New Zealand, I went off to New Zealand after this accident, and with the North and South Island, and they ship semen backwards and forwards because it's so expensive to move horses backwards and forwards on the standardbred stud farms, and then started bring it back here. And I think I sort of learned a bit. I think I was putting everything in the mare sometimes, apart from semen. I really was just trying to feel my way, and then it just snowballed. It really then started to take off. I remember the first year we AI'd 6 mares, and it literally doubled nearly every year. I think the following year I had the stats, it was something like 12 or 13 mares, then it was 25, and it just grew. And we were very lucky. We were in the right place at the right time, and it grew and grew and grew. And then we suddenly realized, actually, this is a great way now, not just on that side of it, as a sort of health and safety side. It was a great way of then starting to spread the genetics around. And it was really the invent of Genus. I don't know whether you know Genus, the cattle company.
Yes.
They said, look, we were really interested in this of maybe looking at the equine industry, because they are very much huge in the bovine industry. So to be fair, back in '96, that's when I really went on my own and started freezing horse semen. Well, they did the freezing over there, to be fair. We did the collecting over here, and it got bigger and bigger really on that side. And then foot and mouth came in, I think about the 2000 or something. And they said, right, that's it. We can't have the semen come to our labs. So we thought, crikey, so we're going to have to start freezing it ourselves, and suddenly realised actually the freezing got better and better if you're doing it on site. So and that was a really very start. And those were the days. Actually, Jonathan Pike was very much involved in those days, because that's when we started setting up the Beaver AI technician courses then for the veterinarians. I remember doing the very, very first ones with Jane Nixon was involved in them, and right, teaching vets, all on that side of it. It was a huge honour to be a part of those very, very early days back in '96.
And I remember coming over to your stud farm in VETchat with Jonathan, and it was a great day, obviously also for doing all the PDing and diagnosis of pregnancies, which Jonathan's able to teach to the students. So it's a great setup you've got there, and of course this has helped in the journey to what perhaps we're going to talk a little bit more about today, which is Nature's Safe. Some of the technology and the techniques that you've learned for horses, you've been able to then start to think, well, we obviously have a problem of biodiversity. We talk a lot about carbon, but actually biodiversity, there are species being lost every day. Tell us a little bit about the premise behind Nature's Safe.
Yeah, well, sort of going back a step, like you're saying, I was my father was actually president of the Rare Breed Survival Trust, which was set up by Adam Henson's father back in '76, I think, but they've never lost a species ever since it was set up. Joe Henson, that's it, who set it up, and I became a trustee of that after my father passed away, and it had a huge honour. And I must admit, I love technologies. I love the new technologies that are out there, like your AI, like your freezing semen. But I love my rare breeds. I just love seeing if there's a way that you could try and use science and technology to help them. So, of course, we were banking semen from Suffolk Punches, Clydesdales, and Cleveland Bays. There's I think there's 14 rare breed or native breeds of equines in the UK. 12 are endangered. So we use these technologies and suddenly realised, actually, God, these can actually help. So we had the first foal born by sex semen. That was through using the sexing machines at Cogent. There's only 80 breeding females left in the country. It's about 300 breeding females in the world. Remember these amazing animals, the Suffolk Punches, they once put food on our table in the 1940s.
Yeah.
I feel we've got a sort of debt of gratitude to really keep them going. Some people sort of say, well, we haven't got use for them now, but to me, they're just an iconic breed of horses, and I feel we've got a sense of duty. And it's so sad to see. I've got a picture of my grandfather actually getting the hay in on this farm with some Suffolk Punches, and so I thought, let's see if we can save them.
My dad was a carter at the Liverpool docks, so he knew the horses very well. And I actually worked as a student at Croxteth Park, which is a rare breed survival trust centre. Rode a Cleveland Bay out bareback, because I'm probably the only one who could get onto it. And of course, we did a lot of work in Croxteth Park with the Irish Moiled cow, which was a very rare breed of cow. And Ian Gill was one of our doctors of genetics, taught us all of our genetics at Liverpool University. So I know the Rare Breed Survival Trust very well, and it's great to see it's still going strong as well.
Yeah, it is, and like you say, I was a huge honour being part of that. And then sort of the light bulb moment came. I thought, well, if we can save a Suffolk Punch or a rhino by using these new technologies, why can't we save the rhinos or the elephants? And sort of looked into it a bit more, and we set up another company, a genetics company, for preserving the tissue samples for cats, dogs, and horses. And again, if we can bring a cat and dog or a horse back from literally a tissue sample, again, why can't we do this for other species? And thought, well, obviously it's already out there. And then I spoke to a few other companies that have got biobanks out there. And there's one particular one in the UK, and called the Frozen Ark. And they said, yes, what we're looking at is just freezing them down at -80. And what you're proposing to do, and we're looking at just at the DNA, but we can't bring these cells back to life. And so they said, what you're doing is the missing link, which was great, really. So we thought, right, let's see if we can establish something to a biobank to freeze these cells in a living state. So that's where Nature's Safe was formed. I mean, it's a really sad predicament we're all in. We hear it on the news every single day about the environmental loss and the loss of habitat. With loss of habitat, we get loss of species. With loss of species, we lose our biodiversity. To put it into context, I think I was saying before, by the time we finish this interview, there'll be another 2 species gone extinct. You know, 1 every 15 minutes, roughly. There's 6 million species roughly on the planet. There's 1 million endangered. There's 40,000 critically endangered. It's really, really sad. So we've all got our sort of sense of duty, I feel, to do something, and I think we all do different things in different ways. And it's the biggest honor in the world to be a part of this. And it's a great team. It's not just I'm the founder, but we have a huge team behind Nature Safe, for scientists and zoo people, and so it's a great team effort to come together. And we've got Chester Zoo is one of our foundation zoos. They've been absolutely brilliant and really getting behind us at the beginning and saying we really want to support this. And we've got ZSL or London Zoo on board now. We've got Twycross. We've got lots of different zoos on board now. We've got 12 different zoos. So it's hopefully it can really make a difference. And we've frozen 144 different species just in the last year, everything from the southern white rhino to Asian elephants to something called the mountain chicken frog, which I bet no one's really ever heard of, but they are as important, if more important, than some of the bigger species, because they're going to help, if we can save them, slow down the biodiversity loss.
Do you know the world's longest running online veterinary conference is back? Join us from the 6th to the 10th of February 2023 for the Webinar Vet's 11th Annual Virtual Congress. Enjoy 10 hours of free live clinical content delivered by expert veterinary speakers covering everything from nutrition to cardiology, with special thanks to our sponsors Simply Vets, Mars Veterinary Health, Royal Canin, Nationwide and WikiVet. Click the link in the description to register today.
I think you make a really good point. I think they're all equally important. We have the sexy rhino species, and then you have the mountain chicken frog, which obviously nobody's heard of. But as a believer, they're all God creatures, and we should try and be saving them, shouldn't we? And of course, what you're saying is with the tissue, you're saving tissue, which then can be eventually somewhere down the line differentiated back into semen, into eggs, and then you can recreate the species in a donor species. I suppose frogs are easier because that's all external fertilization, so you can clone a frog a lot easier than a mammal, presumably.
Yes, in theory, and there's all different aspects. And how it works, basically, when an animal dies at, say, Chester Zoo or wherever, if it's a female, they take a skin sample off, be its ear, and they take the ovaries out and they send us those. And in the ovaries, especially with mammal, you have all the eggs in there, so we slice that up and freeze the ovaries down and the skin sample. Now, the ovaries, in theory, in the future, they've already done this in mice. Have they done it in a rhino? No, they haven't, but in the mice they have, where they can start growing those eggs, in a laboratory. Then hopefully by ICSI and other methods, they can fertilize those eggs. With the skin sample, it's a really interesting one because you've got the whole DNA of that whole animal in there, whereas with a sperm and egg, you only have part of the DNA. Yeah. So you can literally turn that cell, if it's a living cell, it's programmed to produce skin. That's why we like the skin cells, because they replicate. Like when you cut yourself, it regenerates and scabs over, and the cell does the same thing. But if you can reprogram that cell, you turn it into what's called a pluripotent stem cell. And then by adding different growth factors or gene editing it, you can make it think it's a sperm or an egg. Now, that's only one attribute. And obviously, there's the cloning side. There's all different attributes to it. And a lot of it, we don't really know. So a lot of it is for the future. So, it's a huge task. And we need 50 different genetic samples, ideally, from each species, because you need diversity. Yeah. And one thing people don't realize is what makes a species go extinct. Yes, we're talking about loss of habitat, but it's the inbreeding. It's the inbreeding. We see that with the Suffolk punches. We see that with the Clydesdales sometimes. With the inbreeding, it's what makes them go extinct. We see some of these rare breed horses coming in with tiny little testicles when they should be bigger, and that's sort of nature's way of saying we can't carry on. That's the same with these other species as well. So when we lock down that genetic diversity in the future, in 10, 20, 30 or 1,000 years time, we can bring back that line that's lost. And there's a great example. I don't know if you've heard of the black-footed ferret. They're indigenous to America. They virtually went extinct in the 1970s, but got wiped out by distemper. They've only, I think, come from 4 different lines, but they had the foresight to freeze some cells down then. And David Attenborough spoke about it about 6 months ago in the mating game. So they're so inbred. So they got a line that was lost 30 years ago, woke those cells up, cloned the ferret, and she was called Elizabeth Ann, and she was born in 2020, in I think it was in July 2020. And she could be stabilizing that species now. And it's just incredible that, effectively that ferret is 30 years old when it's born. So it really shows what can be done by living biobanks. It really does. It gives us a little bit of hope.
No, it's a great story. And I think, you were saying that you obviously freeze the ovaries and you freeze the skin, but presumably semen also can freeze for a long time. At what stage do you think it loses its viability once it's frozen?
Well, we started freezing in 96, and back then we've got totally different freezing technology than we have now. So the cryoprotectors we use and things like that have changed. And we're still using stuff back in 96. So it doesn't really deteriorate. And I think what we're freezing now, I think will last 10, 20, 1,000 years time. There seems to be no deterioration at all. When it's suspended in animation at minus 196, it doesn't really change. I can't say never, but we just don't see any. And our cryoprotectors we use now are so much better back then. So, we're freezing. We froze some semen off a mouse deer not so long ago, which is one of the smallest deer in the world, incredibly rare. So when we're freezing semen of its species, those we can use a little bit sooner, because in theory we can use that the semen now. And the testicles, we do the same with that. We'll take a biopsy or a testicle tissue, and they have done this in mice already, but again, we haven't done it in other species where they can grow semen in the labs from those, because that because they are designed to do that. So we're doing different parts of the reproductive anatomy and as well as skin, but skin is the easiest one, and 80% of our samples we freeze down is skin, because it's so easy, and it has 5 days. So whether sperm and ovaries and testicles, we have to be freezing down in 24 hours. With skin samples, we've got up to 5 days, which is brilliant. So we can get stuff from all over. Yeah, it's really fascinating.
It's you were saying about why you started this, the unfortunate accident for the mare, obviously very sad, but of course there's dangers to the person trying to collect the semen as well. So I've obviously been involved with collecting semen in cows and horses, and you need to be able to move quite agilely, don't you? It's not one for the faint-hearted, is it?
No, collected off. So we do about 120 stallions here roughly a year, and there's all different shapes and sizes, and they're generally okay. And you can get them on the dummy, but some have got higher libidos than others. And you're right. And I always feel that sometimes you do these courses and things like that we've done for years and say this is what you've got to do, but when you've got to thrust yourself underneath a stallion, I remember collecting off an Irish draft stallion once, and I was at one end of the field next to the mare, waiting for the Irish draft stallion coming. They came at the top end of the mare. Well, it felt like it was doing about 30 miles an hour by the time I know that the Irish draft guy maybe got there. Hit that mare, thinking, crikey, now I've got to get underneath it, this ton of force or through the. But but we've learned an awful lot of how the best environments to do this in now, and it's to be fair, it's pretty safe. But yes, you just have to be aware of this 100%.
Steel toe caps and hard hats are always useful, aren't they?
A must, very much so. Yes.
I still remember, and I won't mention any names, but in my group as a student, and now quite an eminent veterinarian, and he was just a bit too slow, sort of getting the artificial vagina out from the cow, and we all laughed. But of course, he was okay. But he got trodden on a little bit, which made it quite amusing. It was a terrible thing to be amused about, but we'd all managed to move a bit quicker.
Yeah, no, definitely. And some of these bigger horses, like we do big shires, and they're over a ton. But then basically, when we can get them trained onto a dummy mare, it just makes the whole job easier. I mean, obviously, I had the fortunate thing going to South Africa with kept off elephants, but we sedate them and knock them out. Thank goodness, you wouldn't want to be.
Yes, that would be a challenge, Tullis. I'd like to see the video of that.
Yes.
It would be showed at your funeral, I think.
Yeah. How did Tullis? Yeah, what happened to Tullis? Well, this is that way. Yeah, trying to wrestle an elephant.
He died the way he had lived.
Yes. So, but yeah, it's doing all these different species, and what I find fascinating, you get you get the call from the zoo saying, look, this animal has passed away. And as I say, we've got a great team behind us, so we're always trying to work out how to freeze. But sometimes these species come in, they've never ever been frozen before, the sea lions. So, and you've got this critically endangered species, and it's very stressful, in the fact that, and I have to admit, a lot of time it doesn't work because you've got to find out what mediums, what extenders, and all the different things to try and freeze that species down. So, and it's coming to you, and you have a very short time period to do it. So, it's absolutely fascinating. I find it's one of the best jobs in the world to do because you're always trying to think on your feet.
You're learning all the time, aren't you?
Learning all the time, and all the time when you're doing it. And we grow cells. The other day we had Lucy in our other lab, we had I think it was a cheetah that died back in 2019. We just froze the ear sample down. We woke those cells up about a year ago. And it's fascinating how that's suspended in animation. We wrote this, and you can see life forming again in front of you under that microscope. The DNA, or not the DNA, you can see those skin cells where the DNA is stored in there, and it's just quite incredible now what science has to offer for sort of conservation and how it could be used in the future. It really is, and it's just amazing the whole of nature and biology, how it actually works. And I think there's so much more else to learn about all these different species and what we can do with these cells. I think we're only just starting off, to be fair. It's absolutely fascinating. It really is.
Tullis, I know obviously you've got some partners helping you with this, vet partners, Bova, Verback. Perhaps at the end of this, in the description, we'll put your email address so people can get in contact if they want to know more or how they can get involved. But it's fascinating work. I think it's one of our value words is innovation. I love to talk to innovative companies, which I think it's fair to say you're one of those.
Yeah, well, we're very much about having anybody on board. It doesn't have to be money either. I know people say, oh, yeah, but yes, obviously we need money to sustain the charity, but it's about door openings. We're doing an event at the Natural History Museum, in February, and Verback are our main sponsors there, and we've got vet partners, and there's a lot and Bova. But the veterinary industry, I have to admit, have really got behind this, and I can't thank you guys enough out there. But we're anyway, it's £100 to freeze one sample. It's £5,000 to preserve one species. It's a lot, but it's not a lot really, depending, showing what it can actually do. So we're very much about getting people on board, and it's a great journey to be on. And I think we're only at the race start of it, which is fascinating.
Tullis, it's been really fascinating to speak to you. Thank you so much for giving your time, and you better go back and start collecting some samples, I think.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Anthony. It's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you so much for having me on there. And anything to sort of spread the word is a great bonus. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Tullis. Thanks, everyone, for listening. This is Anthony Chadwick, the Webinar Vet. This has been another episode of VETchat. Bye-bye.